In this video, I want to show you how to combine a few animations into a sort of cutscene sequence and how to animate the movement of the monster over time. What we're going to do is I'm going to drag in another instance of our monster over here, like that. And I'm going to make this as part of a sequence. Now, you could technically put in some logic into a blueprint that might move the monster towards the player, and the monster can chase the player or whatever. You can do some complex stuff with the navigation, the nav mesh. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a little sequence and a little animated cutscene. So what I'm going to do is I drag in my skeletal mesh first, and let's give this a default animation. We're going to do just like before, where we say use animation asset, go over to animation to play. We're going to default this to the stand up. I'm going to turn this, let's say turn this off, no looping. And I mentioned I'm going to make a sequence to trigger this whole thing. So to do that, I'm going to go up to cinematics, add level sequence, and then save it somewhere. We'll call this Monster Awakens. Okay. And that's going to change your window down here. That's totally fine. Go back to your content browser on this tab, and you'll see a new asset right there. I just always like to save my assets as soon as they get made. All right, and you'll also see a new little thing down here. I'm going to pull this up, little director's cut thing right there. And this is just going to represent our sequence it's going to play. Now, you may want to turn off autoplay here just to make sure. Don't loop. Yeah, all right. And when we have our monster right here, then we want to actually start our animation. So I'm going to go to my sequencer, back to my sequencer tab. And if we click on the monster right here and we drag him into the sequencer, now we have a few different controls here. Going to expand this. So transform, this is the position, rotation, and scale of our monster. Eventually we're going to control this, but for now we mainly care about the animation down at the bottom. So I'm going to add an animation, click the little add button, and you'll see the animations associated with this monster right here. So I have the stand up and the female tough walk. At the start of this sequence, I actually want to click on stand up. And we want the start of the sequence to start standing up. Okay, so you can preview that with spacebar. And I'm actually going to pull this out a little bit more. So this is the end of the timeline. And you'll see that standing up actually takes a really, really long time. So we're going to pull that up probably to something like 13 seconds, lucky number 13. We're going to expand this just so we can see it. All right, cool. So this is a stand up. And then after it stands up, we want to start a different animation. So I'm going to add another animation and say female tough walk. Okay, and that's going to put it on a different layer. And I actually want this to be on the same layer, and I'll show you why. If I were to expand this out, just like that, you'll see if I play this, it's just automatically going to loop that. But what's happening here is if I have this in two different layers, see that sudden jump into that? I actually want to blend that a little bit. So if I pull it into the same layer and I pull that in like that, we actually get a nice blend into the start of the walk, which looks really good. Okay, so once I do that, I'm going to expand the end right there. So this is our entire animation right now. We're starting to get up. Looks a little dazed. Stands up, and then starts walking. All right, so all the animation is playing properly, but we still need to keyframe the position to move while he's walking. We're going to kind of eyeball this a little bit. So right here, right when he starts walking, we're going to keyframe the starting position. So at this point in time, it's like around 8 seconds, we want the location. In this case, we're just concerned with the location, not the rotation. So we want the location to set the keyframe. I'm going to hit that little button right there. And at the end of our walk sequence, we're just going to eyeball that and say that's going to be right around there. We're going to set another keyframe, start to finish. We can preview that to see how that looks. Spacebar. Yeah, just fast enough to be scary. Okay, cool. And you can always tweak curves and stuff if you want to get fancy, but for now, I think it gets the point of our cutscene across. And again, you could actually expand this out later on into other animations, and you can do some other stuff with that. You can make the monster disappear. You can do all sorts of things. So for now, we just care about our stand up and chase the player animation. So if I hit play, nothing should happen because we're not playing our sequence. So the last step we need to do is we need to trigger our sequence very similarly to how we triggered our animation over here. So I'm going to add another box trigger to our level, just like that. Expand this however you want it. Let's make it start when we're real close, like maybe we're investigating the body. And then we'll need to run back to avoid it. So I think that's pretty good. Widen that out. Okay, so we're gonna get real close here. What's going on? And then trigger the sequence. Once you have this expanded how you want it and you select it, and you go back into your blueprints, open level blueprint. With that box trigger selected, we're gonna do the same thing. Add event, what type, collision, add on actor begin overlap. And you may want to test and see if this is the player. You could do that right here if you wanted. I'm just going to preemptively do another do once. So we only want this to trigger once, not every single time we trigger or we enter the trigger volume. So do once, and once this happens, I want to get a reference to my sequence, right? We could have multiple things happen. We could have mist come up, we could play a particle effect, you could do all sorts of things. Select our sequence, come down here, back in your level blueprints, right click, create a reference to our sequence, pull off of that and say play. Probably not play looping, just go to play sequence player. Right, pull this up here. And because this is the sequence we want to play, compile, save. I believe this will work. Let's test it out. What is that? What is that? And then it gets up. You kind of run away, back off, then it starts moving. Okay, cool. And then, you can mess with that and, in that there, or tell it not to loop, or you can freeze it. And for this last frame, what's happening is it's going to here, and then it's not sure what to do after this finishes. So all you need to do, and let me show you what the problem is here. If I go back to, let's actually make sure that this is set to the beginning. Go back to content browser, hit play. And when this ends, right here, when this animation ends, he's going to hop back into T-pose, and he's going to return to his previous position, like that. So that's what we want to avoid. Now we could lead into other animations, but what we want to do is instead mark to just freeze the final portion until we figure out what else we want to do with it. So to do that, if you just right click inside of the transform, let's say just keep the final position. Like whenever this is done, just keep its final position. I'm gonna right click and go inside of transform, inside this block right here. Right click, go to properties, and then where it says when finished, keep state. And that's just gonna keep the position where it is when it finishes. Again, that's right click down there in the track, go to properties, keep state. And we want to do the same thing. See how it's not hopping back now, but we want to do the same thing with the animation until, or if we have another animation. Again, you could just idle this last one. So we're just going to go to properties and just tell it to freeze. So when finished, keep state. Okay. So what that should do is just freeze them mid-stride like that. And then whatever else you want to build off of that, you can. You can lead into other animations if you want. But at this point, if we pull it back to the beginning, go to our content browser, save our scene, you know what? Save everything. Why not? Go to play. back here, hit our trigger, monster's getting up, starts walking towards us, freezes at the end. So however else you want to cap that off, you can, but that's how you would control that so it doesn't look too buggy. So hopefully you're able to make some cool little scenes with this, and hope this helps you out and create some interesting scenarios.